We've had a number of solemnities in the last couple of weeks. John the Baptist, the Sacred Heart. But perhaps it's worth thinking about why this solemnity is a day of obligation. Why, rather than the others, which are perhaps devotional days one might want to celebrate through the Mass, that today is one in which the Church requires people to attend Mass and hear the Scriptures and receive communion. Perhaps it's to do with the beginnings that Saints Peter and Paul represent. So in the Gospel, Jesus comes to the region or the district of Caesarea Philippi, which is quite interesting in itself as a setting. This area is right in the north of Israel, which is a much more lush and verdant country than the rest. It borders Lebanon, and in the first century at least, the time when Jesus is visiting here with his disciples, it's a land of Gentiles. Also, it's here that we find the source of the Jordan River in the foothills of Mount Hermon. The source, the river, which bubbles from the rock, used to gush from the rock. Perhaps that was what was happening at the time of Jesus. Now it sort of just flows out like everything. It's reduced with the climate. But rushing from the rock at this source, amid sunlit trees and cooling breezes, and it's such a beautiful place that the Romans built a shrine there to the god Pan, praising the miracle of the river that flows out of rock. So the river that marked the entrance to the promised land, and Joshua parted with the Ark of the Covenant, led the people through, and the river where John baptized finds its beginning in a pagan shrine and a land of foreigners. So Jesus and his disciples have gone a bit north from Galilee into the region of the Tetrarchy of Philip, but among the Gentiles and away from home. You might think here this is an example of how St. Paul follows his master. But the Gentiles seem, these Romans, have little interest in the heritage of the Jews. Thoughts of a Messiah or God's covenant. We have here at the shrine Hellenistic Roman symbols, their culture and their language, which seems ill-equipped to place the identity of Messiah, of God's anointed, certainly not in the way that the Jews conceived of it. And so it's fascinating that in this region, Jesus asks about his own identity. Who do you say, or who do people say that I am? And all the answers that are given by these disciples spring from the Jewish heritage. So we have a contrast again between that and the Roman or Hellenistic heritage. Some say Elijah or Jeremiah. That is, drought or exile, punishment and sin. Strong images in the luxurious context of the Gentile shrine, with its cool water flowing amid lush vegetation under the sun. And maybe such suggestions didn't ring true for the disciples, but it was all they had. Except for Peter, who was given more. You are the Christ. And Jesus points out where he has this knowledge from. Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. So Peter's faith is the rock on which the church is built, a faith given to him by the Father. And so perhaps, as we've asked about the rock from which the Jordan River flows, we might ask about the rock that this man is, Peter. And we don't have to wait very long in the scene. Get behind me, Satan, for your ways are not God's, but man's. It's not very promising, and things get worse, because just as Peter was graced with the knowledge of Christ's identity here, so he denies he even knows Jesus. Peter abandons the perfect knowledge he receives. It seems for all his faith, he is not the perfect apostle. And so we might rest our hopes in Paul. Paul follows the Lord away from his home in the same way that Jesus has gone up to Caesarea Philippi to preach to these Gentiles around the world. Despite the tribulations that he encounters, he brings the good news to the world, to the culture, to the language, to the beliefs that have built this shrine at Caesarea Philippi. I have fought the good fight. I have run the race to the finish. I have kept the faith. And Paul even encourages everybody to follow him in order to follow Christ. Imitate me, he says, as I imitate Christ. And yet we know from his own words, as well as that of Luke's, that he didn't start from here. For I am the least of the apostles, unfit to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. Paul didn't come to know Jesus because of his righteous efforts, and neither, for that matter, did Peter. The knowledge of Christ is given, not seized, and can be given to all, even to a traitor and a persecutor. But further, not only that, the church is built on such people. The perfect apostles are found wearing the crown of righteousness only on that day, the day of the Lord. And it is his gift. And so the experience of Paul, the faith of Peter, is that which calls us to the same task of building the body of Christ. Paul knows, the Lord stood by me and gave me power, so that through me the whole message might be proclaimed for all the pagans to hear. And this is if we grasp the gift of faith on which the church is built. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God.